everybody, and welcome back to Miller Meadows. Thanks for joining us again today. Today I want to show you how I prepare wild foraged grapes. We have grapes that grow in our woods and along the fence lines of our property, and every year we harvest those grapes and make them into grape juice and jelly. Now, I don't do a whole lot of jelly in our household anymore, just simply because we don't use it quite as much as we did when our children were young. But I love making wild grape juice to drink. And I'm going to show you a really easy method of cooking down your wild grapes without a lot of fuss and muss and painstaking time consumed. So if you're interested in learning how I do that, stick around and I'll show you how. Hi everybody, it's Lori again, and welcome back to my kitchen. Hey, it's that time of year in my state when the wild grapes are starting to get ripe. So we went out and foraged in our woods and our fence line, and we got a wonderful 5-gallon bucket full of wild grapes. Now our wild grapes might be a little bit different than possibly some of your wild grapes. I'm really not sure the difference in wild grape varieties, but I'll show you what we have. What we have are these very small, very sour wild grape varieties here. And they come in, you know, depending on how they grow or whatever, they come in these really dense groups, or they come a little bit more spaced out. Okay? So what I want to show you today is how I make wild grape juice. What I'm doing today would be the basis. If you wanted to make jelly, this is the beginning steps of making wild grape jelly. What I'm going to do is, after I cook them down, I'm stopping there. I'm going to add sugar. I'm going to stop there, and I'm personally just going to make grape juice because it's just a lot more usable for our life right now. What you would do is you would take your cooked down juice and you would continue making it into jelly. Now, I'm not going to take my time and pick off every individual grape. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my energy. So what I do when we are harvesting wild grapes is I take the cluster of grapes, and first of all, if they come in, you know, when you're picking, the mosquitoes are getting at you and you're kind of in a hurry just to get it done and get out of the wild, right? Sometimes you'll have a leaf or two, you know, or one of those little twirly tendrils that are stuck to something else, you know, a little twig or another cluster of grapes or whatever it is. I wash them all up in my sink. I remove the grape leaves. I remove all of the extra debris. I make sure that there's no spiders or bugs or dust on them. We live on a gravel road, so all of our foraged vegetables and even the vegetables in our garden has dust and dirt on it, along with your rain and birds and blah, 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 right? So you always want to wash everything that you either grow in your garden or go out and forage like we did today. But when I bring these grapes in and I wash them in the sink, what I do is I just try to remove all of the extra stem that's attached on the top. And I do that simply with a pair of scissors. You just nip off the excess, throw it in your pot. So these are clean grapes. Now, I haven't spent time picking out, okay, like you can see that there's a few of these little green grapes that aren't exactly ripe yet. Perfect example. There might be a few of these older grapes that have dried and gotten kind of hard. Now, this little guy, he's almost like a little BB or pellet. He's dried out, but you know what? I don't care. He's going in my pot. He's not going to do anything to change the flavor or the end result of my grape juice. I'm not going to waste time. He can stay in there. I'm not going to bother anything. But what I do is I remove the excess stem by nipping it off. Throw it in there. Excess stem, nip it off. Throw it in there, okay? So you've got all of your grapes washed, you've got your leaves removed, and you have your excess stem removed. What you do is you throw that in a great big pot, okay? And you just simply barely cover it with water. Just enough water to just cover your fruit. You don't want standing water 2 or 3 inches over the top of it. You just want your water level to match your fruit level, okay? Now, like I said, this is the beginning of grape juice or the beginning of wild grape jelly, all right? So what I'm going to do at this point in time is find another twig in there that I missed when I was washing them up, so I'm going to take that out of there. But anyway, so you have your fruit, you have your water level just at the top of the fruit, and what I'm going to do is turn on my burner, place my lid. I'm going to bring that to a boil. After it boils, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, and I'm going to let it simmer for 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes. Depends on how much fruit you have. Alright, so if you're just working with a small amount, you might not need as much simmering time. I'm working with, this is a, I don't know how many quart pot this is, but this is a big pot. So I have quite a few grapes in here. So I'm not going to worry if it goes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a simmer. The longer is not really going to hurt it unless your water starts really evaporating off and you start having scorching of your fruit on the bottom. Generally, that does not happen, okay? As long as you haven't added sugar, which you haven't. All you have is your fruit and your water in here at this point in time. And particularly with grapes, they're not going to scorch really bad. Now, if you're working with tomatoes, tomatoes can scorch on the bottom of your pan really easily, but grapes not so much. So I'm going to bring this up to a boil, then I'm going to reduce it down to just a nice simmer where it's just barely bubbling, and I'm going to cook those for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. After that, I'll come back and I'll show you the next step. Alright guys, so we're back. I brought my grapes and water to a boil, and then I turned it down to simmer, and I simmered what I had in my pot for approximately 20 minutes. And I want to show you how it looks after that 20-minute period of just gently, I think I'm just going to stick this up here right now because it's convenient. And get it out of my way. Microwaves. Storage space too. Anyway, here's what my grapes look like after that 20-minute simmering time. Hopefully you can see this. So the grapes are super soft. A lot of them have fallen off of the stems, and you can tell that they're quite blanched, okay? They're not as deep purple or blue as what they were when they began. And also you can tell that all of my fruit and stems is now way below the surface of the water. It's no more, at the top of the water where you can see it. There's just nothing showing except this wonderful juice. So that's how I personally tell that I've cooked it and simmered it long enough. And you can stir it a couple of times if you want to during that simmering period. That's fine. It's not going to make or break you whether you do or don't, okay? So I have another stock pot. It's not quite as big as the one that I used for the cook down period. And I have pinched my cheesecloth in between the two pans. I have a colander, and my colander I have lined with cheesecloth, and I made sure that my colander doesn't go all the way down into my pan, but I also made sure that my pan was big enough that my colander fits down inside of it, because if you have a pan that is small enough that your colander is going to just sit on top, remember that you have all these side holes that juice is going to come out of, which means if your colander is sitting on top of your pan, juice is going to come pouring out the sides too. It's not just going to go through the center, it's going to come out the sides. So make sure that your colander fits down into your pan, but not all the way down. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. I think y'all get it. Anyway, so in this colander that's lined with cheesecloth, I just get my pans nice and tight. Hopefully you can see. Yep, you can see both of them. So here's my cooked fruit, and here is my straining pan in front. And I literally just start ladling it out. I've got one of these nice big slotted spoons. You could use any kind of a slotted spoon. You could use even one of those spaghetti spoons with like the little fingers on it. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But I've got this nice big wooden or slotted spoon, not wooden spoon, but slotted spoon. And I just start getting the majority of all of that big mess of stems and berries out of there without burning yourself, of course. Kind of hold your cheesecloth, making sure that nothing is going to be directly in the colander, because what you're doing is you're trying to strain all this good stuff. So I just get the biggest mess of it out of there and into my cheesecloth. No real science about this either. All right, so I have the majority. I'm not worried about getting it all out, but I have the majority of the bulk stuff that I don't want in my juice. I have the majority of the bulk out. So then what I do is I take a pair of disposable gloves. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I do it just simply because then the juice doesn't stain my hands so bad. And it also does kind of help protect against a little bit of the heat. Not all of the heat, you know, rubber gloves obviously, disposable gloves are not heat proof. So you will feel some of the heat. But I take up my 4 corners of the bag and I just kind of start twisting, okay? And squeezing out that juice, okay? Now, like I said, this is hot. Be careful. If you have something to hang this bag by to let gravity do its work, and if you also want to leave it, just walk away for a few minutes and let it cool off, that's fine. I don't think I'm a very patient canner. I just want to get it done. So sometimes I do things that are maybe a little uncomfortable for me, but it works. So I just squeeze right hand, left hand. It gets a little warm for that hand. I twist. I squeeze with the right hand. That gets a little hot. Twist that bag tight again. Squeeze with the left hand. Okay? And you can get that as dry as you want to work with. So I'm going to take care of this bag of stems and the berries that I no longer want, and I'm going to get them out of the way. I'm going to get a new cheesecloth into my colander, and then I'll come back and finish up. Alright guys, so I'm back again. I took care of the bulk of that cooked berry and stems. I did let it cool for a couple more minutes, and I squeezed a little bit more juice out of the bag, and then I put it out into another container so that I can feed it to the chickens tomorrow. And then I cut a whole new piece of cheesecloth here. The reason why I don't like reusing the cheesecloth, especially when I'm doing grapes on the stems is because those stems, when you're wringing that bag out, those stems can kind of poke holes into your cheesecloth. And so then you're not going to get all those little tiny seeds. You might have a few of those escaping, which isn't a problem. If you need to reuse your cheesecloth, that's fine. That isn't an issue. But I have enough cheesecloth that I don't have any problem frugally getting a new piece for the rest of the juice. So this is where it gets a little bit more steamy and hot. You know, when I was taking the bulk of my stuff out of the pan, I was using a spoon. Now if you want to use a ladle to get the rest of the juice out, go ahead and do that. You do you, and you do what is safest for you. If you don't have the strength to do this the way that I do it, you adapt and you find different ways. Use a ladle, that's fine. Like I said before, I'm not a very patient canner. I love canning, but I also love canning in a very efficient way. So what I do is I make sure that my pan and my colander and my cheesecloth are all centered well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to lift my stock pot, and yes, it's hot, so please be safe, be careful, okay? But you've all worked in the kitchen and you know what you're doing. So all I do is I take my stock pot of juice and I start pouring it in and straining. Now you can see in the bottom of my stock pot, I have quite a few stems and berries that I did not get out with my slotted spoon. Not an issue. They can just stay in there. And then simply lift your colander out and allow your juice to strain the rest of the way. Now you do have a lot of little bits and pieces in there, so it might take a minute or two for that to strain. This is where all of your seeds start clogging up your cheesecloth. If you want to, go ahead and take up your four corners again. That seemed to help. There. And you can be a lot more patient than what I am. But due to the fact that I am taping, you guys don't need me to be taking a million years to just do these steps. You just want to see how to do it, and then you can figure out the rest on your own. So, we have strained our grape juice. Now, since this is wild grape juice, like I said before, wild grapes are super tart. Depending on the kind of grapes that you have, or if you are making, let's say, apple juice, you're cooking your apples and making apple juice, or even if I have made, the wildflower violets that we make, well, some of us make violet jelly out of. I have skipped making the jelly part, and I make violet juice, which is wonderful, believe me, fantastic. But anyway, you can make all sorts of different types of fruit juice this way. So after you have your juice, depending on the type of juice that you're making, you will have to totally play the sugar by ear. I kind of treat my grapes, my wild grapes, like Kool-Aid. So kind of in my head, what I calculate is every 2 quarts of water I need 1 cup of sugar, or every gallon I need 2 cups of sugar. I think that I have, it looks like approximately 2 gallons of finished juice. So I'm going to add 4 cups of sugar as my starting point, okay? And in my sugar container, I do only have a half cup measure, okay? This is not a full cup, all right? So 4 cups of sugar, I would need 8 half cups. By instinct, I have reached 6 cups of sugar. By instinct, something is telling me you need to stir that and taste test it, okay? So hot juice, that sugar will dissolve really easily in there. I'm going to run and just get a cup really quick. I'll be right back. All right, I got a coffee cup because it is hot. I don't want to necessarily put really super hot juice into a glass that is not tempered or accustomed to having hot fluids in it. So I just grabbed a coffee cup. I'm just going to take a little taste here and see what I think. You know, that's pretty good. It is a little on the tart side, but it's not making me go. So I am getting pretty close. I think I'm going to go ahead. I stopped at 6 half cups, and I originally said 8. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that final 1 cup measurement in there. And maybe a part of another one. But this is what I mean, that it is totally by taste, okay? You put in as much or as little sugar to whatever fruit juice you're making, okay? It's totally by taste. Now this grape juice is pretty concentrated too, and so if after my taste test I feel like I can add a little bit of water in order to get more final product out of it, I can also add a little water to dilute it some, as long as I feel like there's enough grape flavor in there to make it worthy. All right, so let's try a little sip again. Yep, that's about right. So good. So good. I hope all of you have access to wild grapes. They're amazing. It's sweet. It's tart. It gives you a little tang, a little fun tang in the back of your throat. Just fantastic. I don't feel like I'm going to add more water to this batch. I think that the flavor is potent enough, but not over potent that I want to dilute it at all. I feel like I'm really happy with where it's at this point in time. So all I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to heat it just for a couple more minutes and continue stirring that sugar and cooking it just a little bit, just to make sure all of the sugar really dissolves in there. And then I'll be back for the canning step. Good morning, everybody. All right, so I got to be completely honest with you. Yesterday got to be an extremely long day. I had worked part of the day, and then I came home and I harvested some things from the garden and went out and foraged for the grapes, prepared the grapes, got the grapes cooked down, made supper, did dishes. You know how life is, and this is the plight of everybody that cans. Sometimes at the end of your day, you just plain run out of steam, so to speak. And I had reached the point last night where I just knew that I wasn't going to continue explaining things well, and I was just too tired to carry on. Grape juice is very acidic, along with the fact that I had added sugar to it. I had no qualms or worries at all about just shutting it off and leaving it overnight and then continuing on this morning. And so today I will finish the steps of making wild grape juice. Now, one thing also, after I got up this morning, I was thinking about my recording yesterday, and before I started adding my sugar to taste to the juice, I should have stopped there and said, if you were going to make jelly, after cooking your grapes and your water and then straining out all of the stems and berries so that you just had just that plain grape juice, that is where you would start making your jelly by following, you know, whatever recipe you want to, whether you want to take a box of pectin and follow the recipe on there. It will tell you how many cups of grape juice and how many cups of sugar in order to make your jelly. Just follow the directions on your recipe that you wish to follow. But since I'm making grape juice, I'm just winging it as I do all of my juices. Sometimes my fruit is sweet enough that I don't feel like I need to add any sugar at all, and so it's just all natural juice. But with the wild grapes, as I expressed to you, the wild grapes are super, super sour. You gotta have some sugar in there. So I just added sugar to taste. Now, what I have done this morning is I have completely reheated my grape juice that was sitting and waiting for me overnight. I've completely reheated it so it's nice and hot. And then I prepared my jars and my lids, and I also put, now I'm going to steam can. Fruit juices can be water bathed or steam canned. They don't have to be pressure canned. But I steam can in my pressure canner. If you're interested in finding out how I do that, I do have a video in the group, so just search my name and you'll find it. I have prepared my jars, and what I do, since we're working with a hot liquid, you want to make sure that your jars are hot. What I do is I wash my jars and then I put them into my cold oven. I turn the oven on to 200 and just let it heat up to 200 degrees. Now they can stay in that 200 degree oven as long as you need them to. It's not going to harm them at all. You don't want to do it for hours and hours, but you know what I mean. You know, the 15, 20 minutes, half hour that you're getting all the rest of your stuff prepared, those jars can be in the oven with no problem. But if you're working with hot fluid, you want to make sure that your jars are hot also. If you have a room temperature jar and you pour in or even ladle in that hot juice or those hot beans or that hot chili into a cold jar, you're going to have what's called thermal shock. The difference between the hot temperature and the cold temperature of the jar will cause the jar to break, and you don't want to have that happen. So if I'm working with a hot product, I make sure my jars are hot also. Now today, again, I'm going to be using my my old glass flats and rubber lids, which I do occasionally anyway. I've always canned with those, but to be honest, the new flats are a lot more convenient. But my old glass lids and rubber rings, I always heat those in water. It's pretty important to soften up that rubber gasket. My jars are hot. I'm going to take them out of the oven. And if you cannot work quick enough, you would want to just remove these one at a time from the oven and work with a hot jar each time. But the way that I do it, I'm going to get them filled lickety-split, I can guarantee you. So, again, I'm going to shove this up into my microwave so that it's just out of my way. And I will give this one last final stir. Get my hair out of the way so that nobody wants to find hair in their juice, right? Heck, it's my hair and I don't want to find hair in my juice. And then all I do is pour my juice into my jar. You want to leave about 1 inch of headspace. Now if you want to, you can take the time to slowly ladle this in. Whoop, and don't pour too fast. And that's why I say it's probably not physically the safest choice to make. But my kitchen, my rules, and my risk factor. I like to work quick while those jars are hot. I don't like to bend over and get a single jar out and then get another single jar out, especially when I'm doing juice. Now if I was doing salsa, I would ladle it in. Anything with chunks of food, I would ladle it in. I do have a ladle that I will just add maybe a touch more juice to one or two of these jars. So at the bottom of these, oh, you haven't even been able to see a thing that I did you? Well, technical difficulties, people, sorry. My apologies. Okay, anyway, so I had a funnel. I had a funnel that I was using in my jars, and you saw me, I'm sure, pouring the juice in. So I just use a funnel and I move it to the next jar and use the funnel just to kind of minimize the mess. That just makes me laugh. Here, look at what I'm doing, and then I don't have the camera on the work. Oh, you guys, if you can't laugh at yourself, you know, you're lost. Anyway, so I have all of my jars filled with my juice. I just have a clean wash rag, you know, that was fresh out of the laundry, the washer and the dryer. And for fruit juices, I don't worry about using vinegar. Just plain water on a rag is fine. And so just wipe your jar rims. Make sure that you don't have any sticky stuff left on those jar rims from when you dump the juice all over the place. You know what? If your kitchen doesn't get messy and sticky when you're canning, you're not doing something right. That's my theory. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. All right. So anyway, I wipe my jar rims. Now let's see. I'll pick a jar. Yeah, you can definitely see that one. If you're using the modern lid, all you do at this point in time is put it on there and just screw your ring on finger tight. Okay. You don't want to crank it down with your whole hand. You don't want to, you know, put all your force in it. You just want it on there finger tight is all. And then that is ready to go into my hot canner, okay? I've preheated my water so that I am not going to have any thermal shock. All right, so the rest of them here, I'm going to use my old glass flats and rings. Now I have a different way of placing them maybe than some of you do, but I've just found that in order to get that rubber ring placed just right, I like to take it out of the band. And then with one finger, I hold that glass lid with one finger and just screw on the ring until it's pretty resistant. Okay? You don't want to over tighten these either. Okay, never over tighten, but just so that until it resists. And then the difference with the glass lids are actually the Tattler and Harvest, what is it, Harvest Gold or Harvest Guard, I don't remember what the name of it, if it is, but the new reusable plastic lids and rubber gaskets, those are actually styled after these old glass inserts. And so the Tattlers work the same way, where you just want to hold your Tattler on with one finger and screw that band on until there's just slight resistance. Now after I process these in the steam canner, I'll let them cool off in the canner for a few minutes, but when I remove them from the canner, that's when I will completely tighten this down. And it's the same way with the Tattlers. You barely tighten going into the canner, you complete tightening them coming out of the canner. So, you learned something today. Everybody who thinks that these Tattlers, these new plastic Tattlers are the latest and greatest things, obviously don't know about the old canning products. because the glass inserts, and before the inserts they used to have zinc lids that had the glass insert right inside of the solid zinc lid. So glass lids have technically been around for a very, very long time. Now I don't have that centered somehow because my rim doesn't want to go on. When you're working with that hot stuff, it just doesn't always like to sit on there right. There we go. Now I have it in the right spot. And just barely tight. Just to the point of resistance. Okay, so you saw how I put those lids on. I wiped my rim, wiped the rim of the jar, put my lids on. I'm putting them into a hot canner. I'm going to continue getting these last 3 done and in the canner, and then I'm going to steam can them for 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how I take them out of the canner. Okay, so we're back. I steam canned my grape juice for 10 minutes in my canner. I have now shut off my heat and I allowed my air vent or my lid lock to fall on its own, and I allowed my canner to sit here for 10 minutes. Now this is the biggest mistake that most people make. Once that pressure or whatever drops in their canner, they want to just take that lid off and say, okay, I'm done. Now think about how hot it is inside of this canner. Even though I wasn't pressure canning, I was just steam canning. So I never placed my weight. I was not working under pressure inside of my canner at all. But all of this heat is trapped inside of this canner. Those jars are extremely hot. If I just take my lid right off and the cool air in the room, although I'm not really sure how cool it is in here right now, I'm having quite the heat flash. Anyway, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. But the cool air in your room rushes into your canner. If you just immediately remove that lid, rushes into your canner, and it forces that hot liquid out of your jars, which is called siphoning. Now when you're pressure canning, this a lot of times is the crucial step. Opening up your canner too soon. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Relax. Take your time. Nothing's going to happen to those jars in there after you turn off the heat. Allow your canner to cool down. Now if you're doing a traditional water bath where your jars are submerged underwater, it's really a good idea to allow, after you turn off your heat in your hot water bath, turn off your heat and allow your jars to just remain in the water for an additional 10 minutes before you remove the jars and set them on your counter. For the same reason, siphoning can occur. That drastic change between the hot canning environment and your cooler room temperatures, that's what causes most of your siphoning. Now there's other reasons that siphoning occurs, but this is really one of the biggest culprits. So I turned my burner off. I allowed my canner to just sit here untouched for 10 minutes. Now all I'm going to do is simply unlock the lid, and I'm just going to carefully crack it a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. I've just cracked it open a little bit and put the lid on a little kitty wampus or sideways. And I'm going to allow that canner to cool off for another 10 minutes before I go and remove my jars. That is going to slow down the cool off period, and it will prevent siphoning from occurring. Okay guys, so we're back. I'm going to aim my camera down just a little bit here. There we go. Alright, so I cracked my lid open and allowed it to cool for another 10 minutes. Now I feel like it's safe to remove my lid. Now another little thing that, we as cooks and canners, we all should know this, and all of you probably do, but when you're taking off a lid where something's steamy underneath it, always lift it and tilt it away from yourself, or you're going to steam burn your face. So which is a really, really cheap spa treatment, but it hurts. Okay, so if you're using the modern tin flats, now all you're going to do is just remove your jar. Sorry, my gadget pen is in the way here. All you're going to do is remove your jar and just allow it to cool. That lid will pop down, ping or ting, or make a wonderful little snappy noise when it pops down. There's kind of a raised button in the center that will pop down and make a noise when it actually seals. If you are using the old-fashioned glass lids or the new Tattler lids, you want to take and tighten that lid when you take it out of the canner. Now you don't want to over tighten it, okay? You just want to snug it down there good. If you crank it too far and too hard, you will ruin your rubber ring. Or you'll squish the rubber ring so that it pops into the jar. So you want to snug it up, but you don't want to manhandle it, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, I will allow these to cool completely for 24 hours. There we are. Beautiful wild grape juice. Like I said before, that's how you would make wild grape jelly too. You just boil down those grapes with the water, strain all of the stems and berries out, and then you would use that grape juice as your measurement in order to go on and make jelly. So easy though. There's no reason that you should ever feel like you have to pick all those little grapes off of those clusters or stems. There's just no reason for it. You just put them all in there, stems and all, cook them up. Just easy as sin, honestly, and wonderful, wonderful tasting. I encourage you to get out and see if you can find things, food items, to forage in your area of the country or the world. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.